Hello, and welcome to Elements of Style Session 1. I am Dr. Nina Beaman, the Graduate Partnership Liaison for Aspen University. In this series, we're going to be talking about a little book that was given to me by my father when I went off to college many decades ago. He felt like I would do better in English 101 if I had Strunk and White's The Elements of Style. Now, by the way, it's a very small book. It's very cheap because it's been out for a long time. And so therefore, if you want to purchase it, you certainly can. But what I decided was I could take this little book, which is a really, really good condensed version of what you need to know to have good English, and I could offer it to you all in small chunks. There are 5 chapters, there are 5 in the series, and we're going to talk about Strunk and White's Elements of Style and how it applies to you as an Aspen student. So in session 1, we're just going to talk about the elementary rules of usage. And then we're going to talk about composition in the second one, and then some matters of form in the third one, and then words that we commonly oops about in the fourth one, and a very short conclusion in the 5th session. Now, why? Why is because you have great ideas. You are a scholar, but if you don't communicate it in a way that looks scholarly, that is in good, correct English, people are not even going to be able to see your words because they're going to be looking at your mistakes. So let's clean up the mistakes so people can see your great ideas. So let's launch into elementary rules of usage, which was the first chapter and will be the first session. So let's talk about the possessive. A possessive means belonging to. So for example, Dr. Beaman's students. The students belong to Dr. Beaman, and you show who possesses the students with an apostrophe S. There are some exceptions. There are some personal possessives. His, hers, theirs, its, ours, and yours. And this is where it becomes a little tricky because ITS is the possessive, but there's also an IT apostrophe S. And so how do you tell them apart? Well, IT apostrophe S is a contraction pulling 2 words together. And so the apostrophe means, oops, something's missing. Okay? IT missing S, right? It is a wise dog who licked its possessive own wounds. So there you wouldn't use, you'd use the apostrophe for it is, but you wouldn't use the apostrophe when you're talking about the personal possessive. Sometimes the idiom itself, the words together, don't have a possessive. So you don't call it Moses's law, you call it law of Moses. So let's talk about commas because students have a lot of trouble with commas. And your Microsoft editor will actually show you where you use commas and where you don't. But there's a phenomenon known as the Oxford comma. And if you write in series of 3 or more terms with one conjunction, and a conjunction, con means with, junct means join. It's a word that joins things together. You're going to add a comma. So for example, red comma, white comma, and there's your conjunction, blue. The exception is some firms are going to patent or register themselves as not having a comma. In that case, you don't put a comma because that's their name. So you don't want to misspell their name. So you use commas to enclose what we call parenthetical expressions. Parenthetical expressions, I want you to think of, it could be in parentheses or it could be between commas. So ask yourself, could I pull this phrase out and it still makes sense? The instructor, Dr. Beaman, required the assignment to be turned in by Monday. Could you say the instructor required the assignment to be turned in by Monday? You could. You've got a subject and you've got a verb. And so you've got a sentence. You don't need Dr. Beaman, but you're clarifying it with a parenthetical expression, either in parentheses or between 2 commas, but you have to have both of them. If it's restrictive, in other words, you can't pull it out or it doesn't make sense, then you don't use commas. So students who submit work late will receive lower grades. Who is the subject? It's the students who submit work late. That's the entirety of the subject. So if you put commas there, students will receive lower grades. No, that can't be true, right? So because that's fundamental and important, it cannot be pulled out in a parenthetical expression. So let's talk about dates. Dates are punctuated with commas. So you have January to March, comma, 2025, April 12th, 2025. Now, I want you to notice that I said April 12th, but I write April 12, comma, 2025. Sunday, comma, September 9th, comma, 1979. So even though when we speak, we might say in there, don't when you write. So let's talk about a title that's parenthetic. In other words, could be in parentheses. Dr. Beaman, the course instructor, is well qualified. Could you say Dr. Beaman is well qualified? I hope you would. But you have a subject, Dr. Beaman, and you have is, which is a verb. So you have a sentence without that expression. Dr. Beaman, and then you put my credentials. You're going to separate them because EDD RN is not a credential. EDD is, and RN is, so you separate it with the comma. You could also say Nina Beaman, and then my position, faculty. Although controversial, and I read back and forth about this, junior is not usually considered parenthetic. My mother's name was Mary Beaman, by the way, and so I am really Mary Beaman Jr., but you'll never see me use that, okay? Because she used the name, I didn't use the name. So Mary Beaman Jr. would actually not have a comma according to Elements of Style, although you do see it. So use a comma before a conjunction that introduces an independent clause. So let's talk about this. The assignment is due on Friday, comma, you pause as you speak, and there's your conjunction. You're joining two parts together. It involves writing a 3-page essay. You could actually put a period in there. You would pause longer. The assignment is due on Friday, longer pause. It involves writing a 3-page essay. Both of those are sentences. They have subjects, the assignment, and it, and is, and involves. So those are sentences. They can stand on their own. But you could also put a comma there, use a conjunction to make it two sentence parts and join them. That's what conjunctions do. Join them together. And in but are conjunctions. Don't ever start a sentence with and or but because it's a conjunction. It means that you should have joined the sentence before and the sentence you're about to say together with a little a little b, right? And this form. Do not write. The assignment is due on Friday. It involves writing a 3-page essay. That is a run-on sentence because it doesn't have anything joining it as a conjunction. It's basically two sentences you ran together. It's a run-on sentence. The assignment is due on Friday, semicolon, is not appropriate because you don't need that long of a pause. And again, no conjunction. It involves writing a 3-page essay. The assignment is due on Friday. Writing a 3-page essay, the writing a 3-page essay does not have a subject. So it is not a sentence and it can't stand on its own. So use a colon after an independent clause to introduce a list of particulars and a positive, an amplification, or an illustrative quotation. So let me give you some examples of all those things I just said. So to write a thesis, you must include long pause. Now I'm about to tell you all the things you must include: an introduction, purpose, literature review, method, findings, recommendations, and a conclusion. That's a list of what you must include. And a positive is going to be something that provides more information. These are the strengths of this student. I'm writing a reference letter about you. These are the strengths. I'm not writing 15 sentences about each of your strengths. I'm going to say, these are the strengths of this student. Pause. Thoroughness, good communication skills, and works well with others. Amplification is going to be interpret or amplifying something. Even though the assignment seemed challenging, the student was able to write it, write it, to write it within 1 week, an indication of the student's writing skills. So I'm now interpreting, well, if they could write it within 1 week, then obviously it was pretty, challenging, but the student had good writing skills. I apologize, was able to write, it should be to write it within 1 week. So good that you read it aloud because you can find flaws. A quotation, for example, the instructor said, "I will accept late work this week due to the snow." That is the entire quotation that the instructor said. And so then you're going to use a colon and then a quotation, the quotation and a close quotation. You also use it when you say, dear sir or madam, or to whom it may concern. At the beginning of a letter, you're going to use a colon. Do notice, I know a lot of us work in military time, and it's, it's easy to just say, the shift started at 1000. No, you should use 10 and then a colon and then the minutes and then a period, m period. And then for titles, you might have elements of style, which is sort of the whole series I'm doing, colon, session 1. Now notice that in this case, because this is a title, you have capitalized the first letter of the first word after that colon. So let's talk about a dash. A dash is a long break. It sets off an abrupt break or an introduction. So it's almost like a The student was worried about success in the course. Feeling very poorly prepared for the rigor of this advanced level class. Nonetheless, they persevered. Okay, it's like a Violence in gaming can affect teenage minds as suffering of victims is not shown. Therein lies its own trauma. So it's almost like a pause and think. The number of the subject is going to determine the agreement with the verb. So the students, each opening an individual notebook, is that singular or plural? Because you got each in there. Well, remember, that's in a positive. So the students, forget the parenthetical expression, the students were ready. They were ready. Okay, you got to make it agree. Even if there's a lot of words in between, they were ready. Data is a plural word. Datum is a singular word, but whoever worries about datum, right? We worry about data. So remember that data should always take a plural verb. Data showed, they showed, the data showed. Politics, however, is a singular word. So politics is brutal. The trouble with this study is the many variables. Okay, the trouble, again, pull with the study out of your mind. The subject is the trouble is, even though you talked about variables afterwards, don't get confused. Ask yourself, what is the subject, and make it agree with the verb. Use a singular verb after everyone, everybody, each, either, neither, nobody, someone. Everybody agrees to do the work. It's in a totality. It's a singular verb. But interestingly, none is perfect really means no one is perfect. But you would use the plural when none implies a plural, like none are using the correct procedure. In other words, of all of them, none is. Okay. Use the proper case of the pronoun. Here is what APA style is a little bit different because it's trying to get rid of bias. So in its most recent 7th edition, it's trying to get around the his, her, rotating his, her, she, he, that kind of stuff. So you say the student. Now, I don't know if this student is male or female. So I say the student did not want their work shown to others. It took me a long time to get used to this because I was so used to saying his or her. His or her is just clumsy. So now we're saying the student didn't want their work because we don't know male, female. So we use sort of a general their work shown to others. Also in APA style, you want to avoid using us unless they're multiple authors. Now, if you're using AI to help you, it uses us and we a lot because it was fed a lot of textbooks that would say, in this chapter, we will discuss. Well, there were multiple authors, and so that's why they say that. But in APA style, we don't use us. We only use I, my, mine in a student reflection. So you really want to try to avoid the pronouns in APA style writing. Oops, skipped over. A participial phrase at the beginning of a sentence has to refer to its subject. So concerned about his grade. Now, notice I said his because I know that Cameron is a male. Concerned about his grade, Cameron reached out to the teacher. Okay, that is correct because the participial phrase referred to Cameron. Cameron was the one concerned about his grade, but not concerned about his grade. The librarian helped him. That implies that the librarian was concerned about his grade, which she probably wasn't, but she cared about him, but she wasn't concerned about his grade. So who's concerned about his grade? Cameron is concerned about his grade. So then that's where you have to follow with the person that the participial phrase referred to. So some final tips. Writing well creates a beautiful tapestry, like you see that woven tapestry that I got at the Cherokee Trading Post in Seviersville, Tennessee. Your writing is like that. It's a beautiful tapestry, like colors and woven together. Even a small grammatical error can mar the impression you make on the reader, like a big hole in that woven blanket. Review these tips, keep on practicing, listen and read what your teachers say, because the more you practice, the better you get at anything. And please reach out to me if there's ever anything I can do. And remember, this was the reference on which we based this session. Thank you for listening.